Greg was nice enough to wake up, drag himself out here to be with us, because I called him chicken shit yesterday. So thank you, Greg, for coming, man. Every trip we make in the mountains together, I appreciate that. Take it away, Greg.
1931, Adolf Ruth came out here in the summertime. He claimed to have had some maps to the Lost Dutchman Mine, or the Tuttle Mines. Disappeared. They were looking for him. They didn't find him again until December of 31. And they finally got all his body and bones together in January of 32. Well, the Dons were organized and they were looking for something to do. A group of young professional businessmen. They were taking hikes on their own. One of the members was Orrin Arnold, first president. Orrin was a writer, and that's how he made his living. And he was commissioned to do a story on the Lost Dutchman gold mine, full page, and it went national. Now he was being paid by the word, and he was short a few words, and he wasn't about to let that go, because we're talking the middle of the Depression. So he put in a little blurb about the Dons of Arizona are thinking about going into the mountains. Many may go in, some may not come out of the line. Well, they got deluged with letters of people who wanted to go along on the Don's trek, look for the mine. So they all got together and they decided, well, why don't we put together what we would call the Don's Trek. It was a day activity where people could come out and go in the mountains, do some hikes, be safe. They had entertainment in the afternoon and the evening. They put on a story about the Lost Dutchman gold mine. Well, they only thought a couple hundred people would show up. I think it was about 800 people came in. So their first trek was here, just down the road a little ways. They would park all the cars up here. They'd take the people down there. They had a couple of different hikes. They even had one overnight hike, but I think that was later on. What was it, beans that they fed them for
Let's start
dinner?
down there. Let's get to the trek.
Okay, we'll be in a minute.
Talk there.
And so that's how it got started. I think the tickets were 50 cents a piece, and the Dons had to, put up their money to buy all this stuff. Now think about it, middle of the Depression, 50 cents, that went a long ways. But they sold out, and that was the beginning. Then the next year they discovered the spot over there at where the Water Trailhead parking lot is, and they held trek there until '54, and then that's when they went to their new site, which is actually a mining claim that they jumped.
Start moving our feet.
This site, if you look at it right here, and this was almost like an amphitheater. If you look over to the right, down here south of me, you'll see a big flat rock they could stand on. And this is where everybody gathered. So they had cars up and down parked along the side of the road here. And then they had their guest speakers here. They had several hikes, one to Garden Valley, one to Weaver's Needle. And so this is where everybody was gathered. Greg was wrong. It was $1.50 a ticket. I have the first ticket. It was $2.50 if you rode the bus. So they had a bus. So as you can imagine, this was a road, but can you imagine 60, 70, 80 vehicles parked along here and buses trying to turn around and leave that night? That would have been a nightmare to get out of here. So, but this is the site. If you stand on that rock, it's like a perfect spot. We did it last year. I stood up there and was talking to Greg, and you can tell it works like an amphitheater. But then Gus Barkley realized, and the Dons, that this was not going to work with 200-300 people every year, the road conditions and everything else. And like Greg said, the next year, well, that same year, that fall, they started looking down elsewhere. So, but this was the very first trek site. And this is where they staged everything out of. So you can imagine them cooking up Mexican dinners with beans and lunches. And they did not expect the crowd, so the Doñas, the wives of the Dons, had to actually return to town and make more lunches and more stuff for dinner and bring all the food, more food back out to feed the, because they had donuts, they had coffee, they had lunch for your ticket, and they had a dinner and the guest speakers all night.
$1.50.
And Greg's wandered off, that's okay.
Take a nap.
And anybody who wants to wander in there, once you get in there, you realize if that was cleared, and I'm sure Barkley cleared it for them, it was a perfect spot. This was a perfect little spot to do it. I walked by it hundreds of times and never realized what was here. And then once I walked in there where Greg's walking up to that rock and you stand up there, once you get up there you realize that's the perfect place to have guest speakers and everything.
What was the main draw? Was the mine? They were trying to use the mine?
Well, the Dons started by, they were just a lunch club from the YMCA. And when Greg talks, you always think young businessmen, they weren't young 17, 20-year-olds. They were guys in their 30s, and some of them were in their 40s. They were bank presidents, they were attorneys, and they would meet for lunches and talk. And a group of them kept coming out doing hikes and stuff, and they started coming out here more and more in the superstitions. And when Orrin Arnold did his article, they said, well, you know what, we should get a big gathering and take people out to the superstitions. And that's kind of where all that started. So they were in there. The very first Dons meeting just preceded Adolf Ruth going into the mountains, which is odd. And then by 1931, the fall of 31, they realized the southwestern aspect in the superstitions took more precedence over the business side. This would be more fitting if you got struck by lightning. There you go. But those businessmen and all started coming out here. Greg and I have found assay reports where the Dons had assay reports that showed they were finding gold out here. Unfortunately, oddly enough, the Dons records were burned up in a fire from those early days. But we have assay reports, but in the minutes that we have, it never says where they were going. So they were coming back in here and finding gold and stuff, and then reporting, and they were making claims, but we cannot find a single claim or understand what really happened. But we have the assay reports, which shows they were going in and they were finding gold. And here returns Greg now. Well, Greg did come out for the first trek in '56 with his uncle, which was down at, which Peralta Canyon was Willow Canyon then. The Dons renamed it Peralta Canyon. So
Greg still got it, man, since '56.
56, yeah. Well, we just recently made a trip down in southern Arizona, and we went to Cochise Stronghold.
Yeah.
And we weren't going to go there. We were heading home on the highway, and Greg mentioned that he hadn't been there since you were 5 or 6.
No, I was about, I think it was in junior high.
And he's in the back seat going, yeah, I haven't been there since I was, we had and I said, you know what, let's turn it around, Greg, let's go. So we took him down, and we spent the last of the day down in Cochise Stronghold. It rained that day too, didn't it? On the way home, finally. But that was a nice trip for Greg to kind of go down memory lane.
You have to understand that this was in the middle of the summertime. It was myself, my brother, my father, my grandmother, and we were in a car with no air conditioning. And Dad wanted to see Cochise's Stronghold. So we drove forever on this dirt road, and we finally got there, and here was a sign, and that's all there was. Well, you can imagine what my mother and grandmother had to say to my father. I'll leave it to your imagination.
we'll talk about that at Garden Valley. But they staged out a First Water right down here. But Greg's uncle led this hike the first time in 1931. Now, one other interesting was the president, whose name was R.J. Hanley. Hanley was the president at that time. Hanley led the hike to Weaver's Needle. What's really interesting is it says that the hike guide's name is Lively. That was Hanley. Nobody can explain, and even the Dons in their notes don't understand why he changed his name to Lively for just the hike. So if you ever see about the guide Lively in the mountains, that was actually Hanley, which I believe he was an attorney.
Well, there's actually a Lively who wrote a book on the Lost Dutchman Mine.
But he was not that guy. No. For some reason, Hanley decided to change his name as the guide. So he went down in history as Lively.
And in the evening, you got to understand they had no electricity out here. So they had a huge bonfire to provide light in the evening for the evening program, which is the story of the Dutchman Mine.
And then on the way back from the Weaver's Needle, a young man and lady decided to take off and do what young men and ladies do. When they got back, they realized they were missing, and they almost had to break out a search party for them. But they did come wandering in that night, so.
43, 44, and 45. 3 years.
They took a 3-year break, and then they started back up, and then the Forestry Service, once they'd moved down there by the Linesby property, the Forestry Service gave them the lease to build the Dons Camp. So, and it was there till 2004, correct? That was the last trek, the last of the treks, and since 2000, I think we've run the Discovery Camp. So the Discovery Camp still, and the Dutch Hunter Rendezvous actually fit that hole now.
Okay, there used to be a road that left this spot, and it went all the way around, and the road followed all the way up to what we call Transmission Gap, county line, went further to several mining claims. Now the reason they built the road around is so that they didn't have to go through the First Water Ranch and disturb them. But you can, it's hard to see, but you get on a little further on, there are little spots there where you can actually see where the road used to be. Parking lot there. That's where the old-time Dutch hunters used to park their cars when they were going to go hiking into the mountains.
So if you do walk up there, Wrigley, you find it's a big, flat, open area, so you can see it. But so yeah, it's not much of a road anymore.
So anyway, that's the trail going up to county line, or Transmission Gap, as some people call it. And then Parker Pass, and then you can keep on going past West Boulder Canyon and on up to Needle Canyon, East Boulder Canyon.
Barkley Cattle Company. What you're looking at is where the house and everything was and the ranch. What we walked by where you saw that pipe and all was where the generator was. The story behind the generator was over here. We had the corrals. You'll see some of the fence posts after the fire still remaining. And the generator backfired while Brownie Holmes was packing up and working with a horse and a mule, and he broke his ankle, and that was the end of his Dutch hunting days. I had that correct, right, Greg?
Well, the generator was running the drill to drill the well. So that's
So that was into Holmes, but the Barkley family lived here. Bill Barkley and his wife Betty lived here. There was a place called the Tub originally down there. That's where they took their baths. Later, Betty had Bill build a shower inside the house. It was a one-room house. They ate and kind of dining room on one side and then sleeping on the other. In the back side of it, she had him build a shower for them, her and the kids, to take showers. Bill, she decided, was too dirty all the time, so she had him build a second shower on the outside of the cabin behind it, and that's where Bill took his showers before he was allowed to come in the house. Now, Nancy had another great story. Is behind the house there was, and there's no sign of it anymore, there was a little patio area, and it had poles, wood beams up. And what they would do during the summer is they would actually go outside, take their beds outside, put them in there. And Nancy said what we would do is they would take wet sheets and string them up all around, and then the breeze would come in and it would act like an evap cooler. And she said you tried to fall asleep as quick as possible before the sheets dried out, because that was the only time it was cool out here. I asked her once, how did you go to school? How did this work? And she looked at me deadpan and said, I took the bus. So I guess they went down the road and the bus would go so far down First Water and they would take the bus. Sometimes they'd stay with family or friends in town, and then during the summers, this is where they lived. And she had a lot of happy memories about this place and the Quarter Circle U, her grandfather Tex and her dad Bill. But it's interesting now. Later, the wilderness decided they couldn't keep the ranch in here. Everybody is familiar where the horse parking lot is, the horse trailer parking lot. When you just come down around it, you'll see there's an old road that goes up the hill. You take that road and that goes to what you call the second First Water Ranch. So they moved the ranch from here to the outside there. Now that actually still has the corrals and you see all the foundations still because it's outside the wilderness. So it's not, they didn't tear everything down. So you can actually go check that place out and it's actually pretty cool. And you can access it if you go through Garden Valley out to Hackberry. You can take the side canyon instead of First Water, the next canyon over, and you can walk through there back to the parking lot. But there was a lot of history. This is where Adolf Ruth, where the expedition for the newspaper with Mott and Newsom, the photographer and journalist, Odd Halseth, Brownie Holmes, and Richie Wise, correct? And they gathered, and when you see the pictures of them packing, they were packing right here to take them. Their first trip was to Garden Valley, where they went. It rained the entire trip, so they were soaked, and it was muddy, and it was miserable. But they went to Garden Valley, returned here, and then after that they went back down, and they went through Brush Corral, down Bull Pass, and that's where they found the music. The hound would find Adolf Ruth's skull many days later. But that's where they weren't searching for Ruth. It was an expedition for looking at archaeological ruins when they found that. So that's where they staged this. And probably, I think, Greg, about every Dutch hunter in the 30s and 40s came through here at one time.
just about.
They all wandered through here. So Keith Ferland just recently mentioned that Betty Barkley, Tom Collenborn, said she had quite the body. Now, he worked for them, and she took baths down the hill, so we can only imagine what Tom saw.
Now,
Sorry, Tom, but hey, Keith told me.
Now that night, after they found the skull, they spent the night at Charlie Boy Springs. And the story is that they took the skull and threw where the bullet hole had gone in a wire hanger, and they hung it up into a tree, and they had just a old Coleman lantern. They said that was the weirdest sight at night, seeing that yellowish color Coleman lantern flickering off the skull hanging in the tree.
In a rainstorm. They were trying to sleep. So. All right, we'll continue up the path.
Well, later on, if you ever come down here, you can go over and hike on. Toward the end of the valley here, you'll see the remains of several water tanks that they used to collect water.
But we are
cattle.
following the road that goes to Choya Tank, believe it or not. You can kind of see it here a little, but then you'll be going, how did they, but they took the roads, we're going up on there, and they took this road all the way through, winding up to there and beyond. So it just kind of is amazing what they were able to do at one time. But there's nothing really left. The fire took care, I think, of just about everything else outside of the generator pipe. And the Forestry Service removed everything else.
Back when they were running cattle in this country, they used to graze them up there on Garden Valley. And about 1/3 of the way down from the top, there used to be a barbed wire fence going all the way along that edge.
Oh, it's still there.
And there used to be a trail along the barbed wire fence. Not much left today, but I had part of it years ago, and you can still see it.
It's still there, part of it.
And what is it? There are some, that ridge line there in front of us, in the foreground, has 1 or 2 mining markers on it, mining plan markers, that haven't been removed yet. Now, many years ago, Tom Collenborn took me out here at night on the horses, and we saw glowworms. First time, the only time I've ever seen glowworms up here, but they were up there in the bush.
Why did everybody look at me after he said that? Yeah, it was good peyote that day.
You'll first come to an Indian ruins, and if you keep going a little bit further, it opens up a nice little valley, and then there's a natural arch down there.
Or a portal, depends what you think. We did take Randy's son and put him through it several times, and he didn't disappear, so we're thinking it's safe. So, yeah. Greg, yeah, we went on that trip a couple of years ago.
You mean there's another one down here, or you mean when you get up in
down there?
There's one down there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
We'll stop there on the way back. Anybody wants to kind of drop down in there. Up, we have a naked man showing up.
There's one in every garage.
Super Bowl's tomorrow, no streakers.
90th anniversary, we had a streaker. Yeah, that's fine. But this is usually this area, and it's not bad at all today. This is usually the muddiest area of this whole trail. And you'll be able to tell it's kind of soft through here. And if it soaks and you get some horses through here and they start churning it up, you go through here and it becomes that sucking mud where your shoes start coming off no matter how hard you tied them on. Yeah. And that's what I took my daughter through with her on my shoulders.
You're going to take them over to the that one pictoglyph next to the tank?
I'm not thinking, because we'll see how everybody's feeling once we get up in there in that turnoff. Because the one problem is that's kind of a hoof and a kind of
I'm talking about the one down there.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
I was thinking you were talking about the tank up towards the top. That's a hoof and a bushwhack. And last time I went through there with Carlson at the top, me and Carlson came out, and the rest of you didn't come out for 20 minutes. So, and I was done. And Jack's just walking along like nothing matters. He's like a gazelle.
Might be a little treacherous with this wet weather.
Yeah. It's just treacherous. It's in a little arroyo, but it's very steep. And there's a water tank up there with a couple petroglyphs and pit holes. And it's kind of neat, but then you got to still go up from above it, and it's not an easy climb.
And right next to it's an old mining prospect, kind of like a coyote hole. And there's a couple of pictoglyphs next to it. And there's always water there.
Yep.
Never seen it empty. Although, who was it found a dead deer in there once and had to pull it out?
Yeah.
So, if you ever need water real quick, just be sure to purify it, because you don't know what's at the bottom of that tank.
We're waiting for him to get dressed. You changing pants now?
No, I'm just tucking my shirt.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there is somebody there.
Yes, you think I'm joking about
I
that?
thought you were joking about it.
No. One of the things I used to like to do is I'd come out here with Randy Wright, my partner for many years, and I'd point up and start talking. See that ridge? And see that face and that rock in the middle? It's kind of long and it's got a mouth on it, and he'd see it and we'd talk about it, and I said, back, in the 1910, what they thought of that. And he'd say, what? And I'd say, fucking nothing, and I'd walk off. And I did that all day, all the time to him, to the point where he would quit listening to me and just walk by me and kind of give me the elbow, But there was see that heart-shaped boulder? Yeah. You know what that means? See the pinpoints? Oh, yeah. See that directionally how it lies? Yeah. It means fucking nothing. And I'd walk off. But he'd be all...
They tried to cultivate it years ago as a supplement for whale oil, which was used in perfume. Now what it does, the seed is actually wax, and it does not go rancid like whale oil. It's got what they call a double-ended molecular bond. I don't know if any of you remember that from chemistry, but basically it means you can attach anything to it. You can make it into face cream, you can make it into something you can eat, you can make it into transmission oil, you can make it into supplement for perfume, liquefy it, homogenize it, make it solid. And they were trying to produce it commercially a number of years ago, but it's just too difficult. And by the way, it's edible, but don't eat too much unless you boil it to get the tannin out of it. But once you get the tannin out of it, you're okay. You can survive on it.
So if you would have followed the split of the trail to the right when we split early on, that trail loops around into Brush Corral. So one of the loop hikes is to take that one down in and back up Black Mesa. What? Yeah. So it'll lead up there. Funny thing with trails, they always connect. They loop around. This one's not bad. I would suggest go this route, because
You find a painted piece.
once you do that trail and come in here,
It looks like powder.
going up Black Mesa
You find a painted
sucks.
one, let me know.
And then you're so tired, and then it seems like forever to get here.
dated.
But the guys, the Utah guys that died, they found the one guy up there on that hill. The two were dead over on Yellow Peak, and then the other guy was under a tree up on the side of that. So, the Utah guys had to have died in 2010, 2012?
Yeah.
Somewhere around then. Jesse Capon and all that happened in the same few years.
Oh, you said the Utah guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
Well, the one guy was up there.
Yeah.
The other two were on Yellow Peak.
Yeah. The one guy, a friend of mine, found his pack over by Choi Tank.
Well, the Forestry Service marks his death.
No, I know. He dropped his pack,
Yeah.
and then he went up there and died.
Yeah, well, nobody knows why.
Yeah. Well, they were saying, SAR was saying that they think that he went to get water, and he was looking at a map he bought at Bluebird, and it said something like, there's a big water, like it looks like a lake on the map. But then when he got to the tank was dry.
He didn't know about the tank over
Yeah, he didn't know
there.
about this
Yeah.
one. Or he missed Second Water Creek or whatever. And so then he dropped his pack back there, came back. and
Don't hike
the
with
other
no
guys were
water
on-
in
the other
July.
guys were on
is the
Yellow
best
Peak.
advice.
Yeah.
Those
That should be a
guys,
given.
But yeah, it's not somewhere you want to be.
Hey, where's the stone idol monument?
Up there in the clouds, but it's not really. I don't think it is.
If you ever read Bob Schuess's Thunder God's Gold,
It's right along the
there's the
river.
mine that has
Do it early.
the beds in it, has the little alcove. That's over the hill over here. So there's a bunch of those. And then there's a coyote hole. You go down Garden Valley at Barry Storm dug out on that side, and then you can go up to the other mines. A bunch of other guys. In fact, one of Barry Storm's little haunts is back in there. You go back in up the hill and off to the right, and some of his stuff's still back in there. Nothing you want to keep. It's just crap laying around. But Schuess found that one day, and I don't know why. Him and Basil Zaccardia, I think Hank Dandre and a bunch of them were up there, and then just ran into it. He was they were all friends and knew Storm, and then they realized what they found